Picture this. A broke 20-something immigrant kid standing in front of a mirror in a tiny shared apartment in Canada, asking himself one terrifying question that would eventually reshape humanity's future. What if everything I've been told about limits is wrong? That kid was Elon Musk, and what you're about to discover isn't just the story of how he became the richest person on Earth. It's the blueprint for how one human being decided to ignore every single rule about what's possible, and instead rewrote the entire playbook for ambition itself. Most people look at Elon Musk today and see the billions, the rockets, the electric cars, the satellites blanketing our planet, and they think, well, he must have had some unfair advantage, some secret resource, some lucky break that the rest of us will never get. But here's the truth that nobody wants to hear because it's both terrifying and liberating at the same time. Elon Musk's greatest advantage wasn't money, wasn't connections, wasn't even intelligence. It was something far more dangerous and far more available to every single person watching this right now. He genuinely didn't care if people thought he was insane. Let me take you back to 1995, long before the Tesla factories, before the SpaceX launch pads, before the billions. Elon Musk and his brother Kimball are sleeping in their office because they can't afford an apartment. They're showering at the YMCA. They're eating meals that cost less than $1, and they're building a company called Zip2 that nobody believes in. But here's what separated Elon from everyone else grinding in Silicon Valley at that time. While other entrepreneurs were trying to build comfortable lives, Elon was already mentally living in a future where humanity was a multiplanetary species, where sustainable energy had replaced fossil fuels, where traffic moved through underground tunnels at hundreds of miles per hour, and most people who heard him talk about these visions didn't think visionary, they thought delusional. The first major inflection point in Elon's journey came when Compaq bought Zip2 for $307 million in 1999. And Elon walked away with $22 million at age 27, which is where most people's ambition would have been satisfied. $22 million is retire on a beach forever money. It's never work again money. It's tell everyone who doubted you to go to hell money. But Elon looked at that $22 million and saw something completely different. He saw ammunition. While his peers were buying mansions and sports cars, Elon took $10 million and started XCOM, which would eventually become PayPal. He took the remaining $12 million and kept it as a reserve. But here's the crucial detail that reveals everything about his psychology. He moved into a tiny apartment that cost $900 a month because, in his mind, the money wasn't for living, it was for building. And this distinction between consumption and creation is the first secret behind his success that nobody talks about. Most people earn money to spend it, to elevate their lifestyle, to signal their success to others. But Elon earned money to deploy it like a weapon against problems he believed were existential threats to humanity. And this meant he was playing an entirely different game than everyone around him. By 2002, PayPal had sold to eBay for $1.5 billion, and Elon's share was $180 million after taxes, making him a centimillionaire at age 30. And this is where the story gets really interesting, because this is where we see the second secret of his success emerge. Elon Musk has never, not even once, optimized for personal safety or comfort. He optimizes exclusively for maximum impact, which means he's willing to risk total annihilation if there's even a small chance of breakthrough. In 2002, with his $180 million, Elon looked at the world and identified what he believed were the three biggest threats to humanity's long-term survival. The fact that we're a single-planet species vulnerable to extinction events, the fact that we're running an unsustainable energy system based on fossil fuels, and the fact that artificial intelligence was developing without proper safety frameworks. And instead of writing papers about these problems, or giving TED Talks or starting think tanks like most wealthy people concerned about humanity's future, Elon decided to start 3 companies that would directly attack these problems. SpaceX to make humanity multiplanetary, Tesla to accelerate sustainable energy, and what would eventually become his involvement with AI research. Here's where most people fundamentally misunderstand what happened next. They think Elon succeeded because he's some kind of superhuman genius who never fails. But the truth is exactly the opposite. Elon Musk has failed more catastrophically, more publicly, and more expensively than almost any entrepreneur in history. And his success comes not from avoiding failure, but from his absolutely psychotic refusal to let failure be final. Let me paint you a picture of what 2008 looked like for Elon Musk, because 2008 is the year that should have ended him. SpaceX had launched 3 rockets and all 3 had exploded. The company was completely out of money. Tesla was bleeding cash and on the verge of bankruptcy. Elon was going through a devastating divorce. He was sleeping on friends' couches, and he had a choice to make with his last remaining money. He could split it between SpaceX and Tesla and watch both companies die slowly, or he could choose one company to save and let the other one collapse. And here's what he did that reveals the third secret of his success. He refused to accept the premise of the choice. Instead of picking one company to save, Elon borrowed money from friends, maxed out his credit cards, and put every single dollar into both companies simultaneously, betting everything on a 4th SpaceX launch that had to succeed or the company would be liquidated. And on Christmas Eve 2008, the Falcon 1 became the first privately funded liquid fuel rocket to reach orbit, and NASA awarded SpaceX a $1.6 billion contract 3 days later, saving both companies. Most people would call that luck, but here's what they're missing. Luck is what happens when you've put yourself in position to be saved by a miracle, and Elon had engineered a situation where only a miracle could save him, which meant he either got the miracle or he lost everything. And that level of commitment fundamentally changes the probability field around you because, when you've bet everything, you work with an intensity that people who have hedged their bets cannot comprehend. The 4th secret behind Elon's success is something he calls first principles thinking. But most people misunderstand what that actually means in practice. It doesn't mean being smart or analytical. It means being willing to question literally everything, including things that everyone knows are true, and let me give you a concrete example. When Elon started SpaceX, everyone in the aerospace industry told him that rockets are expensive because they're rockets. That's just the nature of rockets. They require exotic materials and complex manufacturing and specialized labor, so of course they cost $65 million. But Elon asked a different question. What are rockets made of? And the answer is aluminum, titanium, copper, and carbon fiber. So he calculated the raw material cost of a rocket and discovered it was only about 2% of the sale price, which meant the other 98% was manufacturing, overhead, markup, and inefficiency. So instead of accepting that rockets are expensive, he asked, how do we build a rocket factory that manufactures rockets the way cars are manufactured? And everyone said it was impossible, and he did it anyway. And now SpaceX launches rockets for a fraction of what NASA or Boeing or Lockheed Martin charges. And this same first principles approach is what led to Tesla's gigafactories, to the Starlink satellite constellation, to the Boring Company's tunnel drilling innovations. Because Elon doesn't ask, how do we do this better? He asks, why are we doing it this way at all? The 5th secret is more uncomfortable to talk about because it reveals something about success that violates our cultural narratives about work-life balance and mental health. Elon Musk works with an intensity that most people would consider abusive if they did it to themselves. We're talking 80 to 100-hour weeks for decades. We're talking sleeping on factory floors during production hell. We're talking missing his own children's birthdays and important life events. And here's where I need to be very careful because I'm not saying this is healthy. I'm not saying this is what everyone should do. I'm not even saying Elon should do it. But what I am saying is that if you want to understand why Elon has accomplished what he's accomplished, you cannot ignore the fact that he has simply outworked almost everyone else at a level that compounds over decades. And when you're working 100 hours a week while your competition is working 40, you're not getting 2.5 times more done. You're getting exponentially more done because you're learning faster, iterating faster, building momentum faster, and attracting people who want to be part of something that's moving at that velocity. The sixth secret is about risk tolerance, and this is where Elon diverges from almost every other successful entrepreneur. Most successful people become more risk-averse as they accumulate wealth because they have more to lose. But Elon has become more comfortable with existential risk as he's gotten wealthier because his mission hasn't changed. He's still trying to solve the same civilizational scale problems, which means he views his wealth not as something to protect, but as ammunition that he hasn't deployed yet. And this is why in 2021, when he was already the richest person in the world, he put up tens of billions of his own money to buy Twitter because he believed the platform was important for free speech and human discourse. And whether you agree with that decision or not, you have to recognize that most billionaires would never risk their legacy and reputation on something so controversial. They'd protect what they've built. But protection of legacy has never been in Elon's vocabulary, only expansion of mission. The seventh secret is something Elon has said explicitly, but people don't take seriously. He genuinely believes he might die before achieving his goals, and he structured his entire life around maximizing the probability that his missions succeed even if he's not there to see them, which is why he's so obsessed with building systems and companies that can operate without him. Why he's so focused on making SpaceX and Tesla economically sustainable rather than dependent on his personal involvement. Because in his mind, he's racing against time, against the heat death of his own biology. And this creates an urgency that simply doesn't exist for people who think they have unlimited time. The eighth secret is about talent and how Elon builds teams, and this is fascinating because he doesn't hire the way most companies hire. He doesn't care about pedigree or credentials or where you went to school. He cares about one thing. Can you solve impossible problems? There's a famous story about Elon interviewing engineers where he asks them, "Tell me about the most difficult problem you've ever solved and exactly how you solved it." And he doesn't want general answers. He wants the specific technical details, the exact moment where you had the breakthrough, the precise mechanism by which you overcame the obstacle. Because Elon understands that people who have actually solved hard problems have a different cognitive signature than people who have just been near hard problems. And he's building teams of people who have that signature, people who get excited rather than intimidated when told something is impossible. The ninth secret is about feedback loops and iteration speed. And this is where you see Elon's video game background come through. He said that growing up playing video games taught him that you can keep trying different strategies until something works, that failure isn't permanent, it's just information, and this philosophy permeates everything he does. SpaceX doesn't build one rocket and hope it works. They build rockets expecting them to explode so they can learn from the explosion and iterate. Tesla doesn't wait for perfection. They ship cars and then improve them with over-the-air software updates, treating real-world vehicles like beta tests. And this willingness to iterate in public, to fail in front of everyone, to have your mistakes dissected by media and critics, requires a level of ego resilience that most people simply don't have. Because most people need to be right. They need to look smart. They need external validation. But Elon needs to make progress. And he's willing to look stupid in the short term if it means learning something that accelerates long-term progress. The 10th secret is perhaps the most important, and it's about vision specificity. When Elon talks about making humanity multiplanetary, he's not talking in vague aspirational terms. He's talking about specific engineering challenges. How do you create a fully reusable rocket system that can carry 100 people to Mars? How do you generate power on Mars? How do you create a sustainable water supply? How do you build habitats that protect against radiation? How do you create a propellant production facility using Martian resources? This level of specificity transforms a fantasy into an engineering problem set, and engineering problems can be solved, which means Elon has taken what sounds like science fiction and converted it into a list of difficult but tractable challenges. And this conversion from vision to specific problems is something anyone can do with their own goals. Instead of "I want to be successful," ask, "What specific capabilities do I need to develop? What specific knowledge do I need to acquire? What specific relationships do I need to build?" Because vague goals generate vague effort, but specific problems generate specific solutions. The 11th secret is about Elon's relationship with public opinion, and this is where he differs radically from most CEOs and public figures. He genuinely doesn't care if people like him, which is almost unheard among people who depend on public support for their companies. Most CEOs are obsessed with their public image. They hire PR teams. They carefully craft their personas. They avoid controversy, but Elon tweets whatever he's thinking, gets into public feuds, makes jokes that offend people, says controversial things, and the conventional wisdom is that this is bad for business. But here's what actually happens. By being completely authentic, even when that authenticity is unlikable, Elon has built a following of people who trust that he's real, that he's not performing, that what you see is what you get. And in an age of corporate speak and carefully managed personas, that authenticity is magnetic. It creates fanatic loyalty among people who believe in his missions. And yes, it also creates fanatic opposition among people who dislike him. But Elon has calculated that passionate supporters are more valuable than lukewarm approval from everyone. The 12th secret is about how Elon processes information and makes decisions, and people who have worked with him describe it as almost superhuman. He can absorb technical information across multiple domains: aerospace engineering, software, manufacturing, physics, materials science, and synthesize it into strategic decisions faster than almost anyone they've encountered. And this isn't just raw intelligence. It's the result of decades of obsessive learning, of reading textbooks on rocket propulsion, not because he had to, but because he wanted to understand every variable in the system, of spending time on factory floors understanding every step of the manufacturing process, of personally reviewing and approving designs because he believes the CEO should be the chief engineer, not just the chief executive. And this depth of technical knowledge means that when someone tells him something is impossible, he can often identify specifically why they're wrong because he understands the physics and engineering better than they do. The 13th secret is perhaps the most philosophical. Elon Musk has structured his entire psychology around the idea that personal suffering is acceptable if it serves a larger mission, which means he's willing to be miserable, stressed, anxious, sleep-deprived, and publicly humiliated as long as the missions are advancing. And this is not a mentally healthy way to live. It's probably not even an optimal way to live, but it is an incredibly effective way to accomplish historically significant things, because most people optimize for daily happiness, for stress reduction, for work-life balance, and those are reasonable things to optimize for if your goal is a pleasant life. But they're not what you optimize for if your goal is to fundamentally alter humanity's trajectory. And Elon has chosen the latter, which means he's accepted a life that most people would find intolerable in exchange for a legacy that most people would find impossible. So what does all of this mean for you? For someone watching this who doesn't have billions of dollars, who isn't starting rocket companies, who isn't trying to colonize Mars? Here's the uncomfortable truth. You probably can't replicate Elon Musk's success at his scale because his success required a specific combination of intelligence, work ethic, risk tolerance, technical knowledge, timing, and yes, some luck that is extraordinarily rare, but what you can replicate is the underlying operating system, the core principles. First, stop optimizing for safety and start optimizing for impact, which means asking yourself not, what can I do that's safe, but what would I do if I knew I couldn't fail? And then doing that thing anyway, fully accepting that you might fail. Second, adopt first principles thinking in everything. When someone tells you that's just how it's done, that's a signal to dig deeper, to ask why, to question the assumptions, because every industry is filled with inefficiencies that persist simply because nobody's bothered to question them. Third, be willing to work at an intensity that makes other people uncomfortable, not because work is virtuous, but because if you want to compress decades of progress into years, you need to operate at a different speed than everyone else, and that speed comes from hours invested. Fourth, make yourself okay with public failure, with looking stupid, with being wrong, because the alternative is playing it safe, and playing it safe guarantees mediocrity. Fifth, get specific about your vision. Transform vague dreams into concrete engineering problems, because dreams stay dreams but problems can be solved. Sixth, build a team of people who are excited by impossible challenges rather than intimidated by them, because the people around you will either amplify your ambition or constrain it. Seventh, treat money as ammunition, not as a trophy. Earn it to deploy it toward problems that matter, not to signal your success to others. Eighth, develop authentic relationships with risk. Understand that every significant achievement requires betting something valuable, and the bigger the achievement, the more valuable the bet. Ninth, become a learning machine. Read obsessively, ask questions constantly, dig into the technical details of things even when you don't think you need to, because depth of knowledge compounds into strategic advantage. 10th, choose a mission larger than yourself, something that matters whether you succeed or not, because that mission will sustain you through the failures, the criticism, the exhaustion, and the doubt that comes with attempting anything significant. The real reason behind Elon Musk's success isn't that he's smarter than everyone else, or luckier or more privileged. It's that he's been willing to endure a level of pressure, risk, public scrutiny, and personal sacrifice that most people correctly choose not to endure because they value their peace, their relationships, their mental health, and their present happiness more than they value changing the world. And that's a perfectly reasonable choice. It might even be the wiser choice. But it's not the choice that leads to rockets landing themselves, or electric vehicles transforming an industry, or satellite internet connecting the globe. And if you find yourself inspired by what Elon has built but unwilling to pay the price he's paid, that's not weakness or failure, that's just honesty about your priorities. But if you find yourself thinking, I would pay that price, I would endure that suffering, I would risk that failure if it meant achieving something that mattered, then everything changes. Because suddenly you're not looking for permission or for a guarantee of success, you're just looking for the specific next problem to solve, and that shift from, how can I be successful, to, what problem am I going to solve, is the shift that transforms ordinary ambition into the kind of relentless, unreasonable, historically significant impact that defines a life like Elon Musk's. And the most beautiful and terrifying part of this entire analysis is that nothing I've described is actually impossible for you. It's just improbable because it requires sacrifices most people aren't willing to make. But improbable isn't the same as impossible. And the gap between improbable and impossible is where every significant human achievement lives. So the only question that matters is this: what are you willing to sacrifice to close that gap?